In a locked filing cabinet deep within the private archives of an elite London exploration firm, there sits a weathered, leather-bound diary from 1953. It belonged to the last known witness who mapped the deep Antarctic interior before the entire continent was suddenly and permanently quarantined from the public. This diary does not describe an empty, frozen wasteland. It describes structural anomalies. 9 years. That is exactly how long the mainstream media has been telling you that the Antarctic ice shelf has been in an accelerating collapse. The scientists tracking it stopped talking about natural timelines a long time ago. What they are terrified of now is what is underneath, not rock, not ancient sediment. Something far older, far stranger, and directly connected to our erased old world heritage. We are told the official story of the melting ice is simply a climate tragedy, measured in degrees and rising seas. But what if the melting is actually a cover story? A calculated trigger event designed to mask the greatest scramble for suppressed technology and untold wealth in human history. History was deliberately falsified to hide what was left behind. And what is currently being exposed under 2 miles of glacial cover will shatter the accepted reality they have meticulously built for us. The official narrative insists that Antarctica is merely a desolate, untouched wilderness. But the global elite have known since the 1950s that the continent sitting under 2 miles of glacial cover is far from empty. Mainstream science casually admits contains one of the largest coal deposits on Earth. It holds staggering amounts of iron ore, chromium, uranium, and gold. Furthermore, it conceals vast petroleum reserves, with offshore hydrocarbon potential estimated to be in the hundreds of billions of barrels. But what if these anomalous deposits are not natural formations at all, but the deliberately buried infrastructure of a continent, spanning hydraulic power grid that once sustained glorious underground cities? We must always ask ourselves, why was this erased? The answer lies in the highly suspicious Antarctic Treaty of 1959. We are told 54 nations, including 12 original signatories, harmoniously united to prohibit all mineral extraction to preserve a scientific sanctuary. But consider the timing. This unprecedented treaty locked down an entire landmass just as explorers were beginning to unearth physical evidence of our true old world story. For 60 years, there was supposedly no economic incentive strong enough to break this consensus. To guarantee this lockdown remained absolute, the Protocol on Environmental Protection was signed in Madrid in 1991. This extended the prohibition indefinitely. However, indefinitely is a carefully weaponized word. The Madrid Protocol includes a highly specific review clause. After exactly 50 years, any party to the treaty can call for a review of the prohibition. 50 years from 1991 is the year 2041. Why 2041? Why establish a multi-generational countdown clock? Because the architects of our reality knew the ice cover would eventually be compromised. The melting that has been rapidly accelerating since 2015 is not incidental to that looming date. It is the exact engineered context in which that date arrives. To grasp the magnitude of this deception, we must connect it to how our broader history was deliberately falsified. Think about the missing 1890 census. Mainstream historians claim those vital records from 1890 tragically burned in a fire. But what if those destroyed documents contained absolute proof of individuals who remembered the old realm, perhaps even documenting the last living giants? Just as the centralized banking system was thrust upon the public in 1863, before which America had no banks of this parasitic nature, systems of control are repeatedly implemented to hoard power and obscure our true old world heritage. Look back to the year 536 AD, when historical records state the world mysteriously went dark, freezing populations and resetting the timeline. Or consider 1855, the year the entire city of Chicago was allegedly raised up out of the mud using primitive tools. These were major reset events, and the calculus regarding the ultimate reset vault Antarctica began dramatically shifting around 2010, accelerating in direct proportion to the melting ice. To understand what they are actually scrambling for right now, you must look not at the ice cores, but at a massive structural fracture. In the year 2017, a colossal crack that had been expanding across the Larsen Sea ice shelf finally completed its journey, carving out one of the largest icebergs ever recorded. This massive block, roughly the size of the state of Delaware, was officially designated as Iceberg 68. It drifted for 4 years before breaking apart in the South Atlantic. But what this carving actually exposed was not just open water. It exposed a newly accessible seafloor in regions that mainstream academics aggressively claim had been covered for at least 10,000 years. Almost immediately, research vessels funded through an opaque consortium of elite universities and private foundations rushed in to begin detailed sonar mapping of these newly exposed zones. The sanitized data was published in public scientific journals, exactly as the system demands. But what was hidden from the public, what was actively suppressed, was the list of shadowy corporate entities that secured exclusive access to the raw data through quiet licensing agreements. Why was this erased from the public discourse? Because they know what lies beneath the sediment. The true panic of the global elite centers around the Thwaites Glacier, a massive frozen expanse roughly the size of Florida. We are told it contains enough frozen water to raise global sea levels by over 2 feet, and it is destabilizing faster than any official model predicted. But in the year 2021, researchers made a discovery beneath the glacier that sent shockwaves through the hidden hierarchy. They found an astonishing anomaly, a cavity 2 miles wide and nearly 1,000 feet tall, formed perfectly between the ice and the bedrock below. A sprawling, cavernous space that, according to natural glacial physics, should not exist at all. This immense cavity meant the glacier was losing ice from the bottom, indicating internal structural melting. It strongly suggests artificial, geothermal thermal activity deep underground, perhaps the remnants of a dormant, subterranean old-world heating network. By the time a scientific paper is published about such impossible anomalies, the global positioning has already begun. China quietly acceded to the Antarctic Treaty in 1983. Since then, they have constructed 5 massive, highly secured research stations on the continent, more than any other nation except the United States. Their most recent installation, opened in the year 2024, is strategically positioned in a highly remote sector of East Antarctica. Mainstream geological surveys casually suggest this area sits above a monumental rare earth mineral deposit. We are told these rare earth elements merely power mundane modern technology. But consider that China currently controls approximately 60% of global rare earth production and 85% of processing capacity. What if these specific deposits beneath the East Antarctic ice are actually the unmapped remnants of ancient suppressed energy systems? The very same atmospheric power architecture that once fueled the legendary 124-year bulb. The entities quietly mapping these zones know that securing this grid will completely restructure global power dynamics, ensuring they control the buried wealth of Tartaria before the ice fully reveals its secrets. The melting is not a tragic accident, it is the scheduled trigger event. In the year 2022, a highly revealing paper published in the journal Nature Climate Change confirmed an alarming truth that polar researchers had been quietly observing for years. The sea ice surrounding Antarctica had undergone what the authors explicitly called an abrupt and unprecedented decline. Not gradual, abrupt. In a single year, the sea ice extent dropped to a terrifying record low, plummeting almost 1 million square kilometers below the previous record. Mainstream researchers openly describe themselves as struggling to explain the magnitude of this decline. But why are they struggling? Because their official models refuse to account for the sudden reactivation of dormant, old-world geothermal engines warming the continent from the inside out. Consider the massive subglacial anomalies. There are hundreds of them scattered across the hidden continent. Vast bodies of liquid water trapped beneath miles of ice, miraculously kept liquid by what we are told is merely natural heat. Lake Vostok, the absolute largest of these, is roughly the size of Lake Ontario. Mainstream scientists claim it has been completely isolated from the surface for up to 34 million years. While astrobiologists obsess over the biology, the global elite are quietly asking a much darker question: what anomalous mineral and technological concentrations exist in water that has been steeping against the deep Antarctic bedrock for 30 million years? The limited, heavily redacted data we possess from the Vostok ice core and from covert seismic surveys suggest the concentrations are world-changing. Are these natural lakes, or are they the deliberately flooded, subterranean domains of an erased civilization? The true historical revision of the early 21st century will reveal that the Antarctic Treaty did not preserve the continent out of environmental goodwill. In 1959, the Cold War logic of keeping Antarctica neutral was merely a convenient cover story. It allowed the superpowers to mutually secure the perimeter of the world's largest suppressed vault until they developed the technology to extract its secrets. Now, under the guise of ecological observation, the science stations have aggressively multiplied. The public is told these nations are simply positioning for natural resources. We are told the trans-Antarctic mountains hold the largest coal deposit on Earth, estimated at up to 500 billion tons. We are told there are iron ore deposits directly comparable in scale to those in Western Australia, alongside incredibly valuable concentrations of chromium, manganese, and titanium. We are told the offshore shelf, specifically the Ross Sea Basin, holds up to 50 billion barrels of oil equivalent. But what if these staggering measurements of raw materials are actually the decayed, physical remnants of colossal Tartarian infrastructure? None of this can legally be accessed before the year 2041 at the earliest, and even then, only if the treaty framework is successfully modified by a three-quarters majority vote. But economic history dictates that legal barriers do not stop the powerful. The ice is intentionally thinning. The 50-year countdown clock is running out. The decisions regarding the ultimate unveiling, or the final destruction of our hidden history, are being made right now, behind closed doors. The global powers are not desperately negotiating in secret rooms simply to save coastal populations from rising tides. They are preparing for the grand unveiling of an erased world. For over 60 years, a fragile international treaty has served as the ultimate lock on the largest vault on Earth. Now, the frozen barrier is intentionally thinning. The 50-year countdown clock toward the year 2041 is running out much faster than the public is allowed to know. Antarctica is not merely a melting continent at the bottom of our map. It is the absolute final iteration of the oldest story in the modern era. A suppressed realm claimed by the elite long before the masses even knew it existed. The ice is the only thing standing between the meticulously crafted illusion we call history and the startling reality of the next global scramble. The entities that position themselves earliest will attempt to control the suppressed technology of our ancestors. But as the ancient, buried infrastructure inevitably breaches the surface, we are left with one haunting question. When the accepted timeline fully collapses and the lost empires are revealed, will you blindly accept the new reality they try to sell us, or will you demand the hidden truth of the old world?